Free trade. Unrestricted access to other markets. New places to sell and make money. They can sell on our turf, and we get to sell on theirs. Sounds fine, doesn't it? What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, everything. A well-developed country like the United States needs to approach trade with less developed nations with some caution. Third world countries have laborers willing to work for a small fraction of what American workers are paid. Even if American workers were willing to work for such abysmal salaries, they wouldn't make enough to survive on. Third world countries are too poor to afford the environmental standards that have improved our lives here in America. Their workers live and work in filthy, sometimes toxic environments. But their goods are made cheap. We have labor laws that wealthier nations pass for the benefit of their workers. These laws impose an expense on companies, but it's an expenditure we can afford. Poor countries can't and don't. Their workers suffer, but without the overhead, they do make cheap products. These are inherent difficulties for any prosperous nation when it trades with underprivileged ones. That doesn't mean that trade between them can't be beneficial, but the high-wage nation needs a little circumspection to make sure that potentially beneficial trade doesn't turn into a race to the bottom. So how have we done? Has the United States been circumspect? Are we taking care not to allow our hard-won economic prosperity to unravel? Far from it. In addition to the already extant problems, we have added more to the mix and allowed other nations to pile on top of those. These nations devalue their currency, making it cheap to buy their products. When we buy goods with artificially low prices, we kill American jobs. Lower prices may sound attractive, but what good are low prices to a recently laid-off worker who can't buy anything at all? Sorry about your job, buddy. But while you're using your savings to make it through each month, you can get some really cheap stuff from China. As if the currency manipulation were not enough, many countries directly subsidize their exporters, allowing them to sell in our market for below their cost of production. More American jobs withering away. Those are two major disadvantages for our producers. Now, there are ways to offset these, but we're not taking advantage of them. In fact, we're doing the opposite, making an already risky situation worse. We sign trade agreements that encourage foreigners to take over American businesses. We remove every conceivable obstacle in their way, and there is no reciprocation for American firms to buy into foreign businesses. We refuse to implement a border-adjusted tax, which can be used to rebalance a trade relationship made untenable by currency devaluations. Instead of the US using a border-adjusted tax to protect itself from the subsidies and currency manipulations of other nations, it is those other nations that use the border-adjusted tax on us. Perhaps most alarming of all, our trade agreements include investor-state dispute resolution clauses which allow corporations to sue governments. If a business operates in a foreign country with lower standards of regulation, the US may bar it from doing business in America until it raises its standards. But with an investor-state dispute resolution clause, that business can actually sue our government to force it to lower its standards to those of the less vigilant foreign nation. And it doesn't end there. An American firm that doesn't want to deal with sometimes costly but important, even life-saving regulations can get around them by opening an office in a foreign land with lower standards and then suing the US government as a foreign corporation. This has already happened. So what are the results of this insanity? It starts with a trade deficit, and ours is massive. They make their goods cheap, sometimes artificially cheap, and Americans line up to buy the imports. Foreign nations start to accumulate a lot of money, and American workers are laid off, exacerbating the unemployment problem. With all the money foreign corporations have accumulated, they can start buying out American firms. This not only makes them privy to our superior technology, it also allows them to ship more jobs overseas. More Americans are unemployed, and now they can make more goods on the cheap to sell here, to get more of our money, to buy more of our firms, to ship more jobs overseas, to make more cheap products to sell here and get more of our money, to buy more of our firms. It's a cycle that never ends, a downward spiral. When our firms leave, our tax base erodes. When our workers are unemployed, our tax base erodes. With less revenue coming into the government, we have to borrow to meet our needs. We borrow from the very countries that are economically devastating us, and then we have to pay them interest on what we borrow. Meanwhile, our bridges are crumbling, our highways are cracked, and our people are going bankrupt paying for health care. The truth is that if we wanted to destroy the United States, we could hardly have invented a better way to do it. It is in our power to turn things around, and we can start by changing the way we trade with the rest of the world.